Live from the Talking Joe Studios. It's Talking Joe.
Talking Joe is on the air.
Hey kids, it's me, Mark, and welcome to Talking Joe, the G.I. Joe Comics podcast. Today, this episode, we will indeed be talking about G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, issue 317. Sometimes people call that 317. That was released just this last Wednesday, June the 4th, 2025. Synopsis. Snake Eyes strikes. The G.I. Joe ninja team has infiltrated Springfield, but nothing is as it seems. Meanwhile, Dr. Mindbender has his revenge. So that will be what they said would happen in this issue. Will it be delivered? We'll find out in a minute. If you are new to the show, you can find out all about us at our website, talkingjoe.co.uk. And at the time of recording and streaming, we are live, which means that we can interact with you, the listener. So give us a message and I can put it on screen. Now, I will not be talking about this issue just on my own. As normal, I will be joined by my co-host. It's a Real American Tim. It's Tim Finn.
Hello, listeners, and hello, viewers, and hello, Mark.
Hello, Tim. How are you?
I'm well.
Okay, so catching up with some news. This is introspective news. We will be at Joe Fest. Woo! That is going to be, from time of recording, 2 weeks away, right?
And if you're listening to this episode not when it's live, but when it shows up sort of in a normal way where podcasts go, that is
a little over a week.
7. Today's the. And then, yes, that's about a week. It's about a week later. And
it has been revealed, Tim, that we will be talking to special guest Larry Hama at Joe Fest on Sunday, June the 22nd. And today, again, day of recording, 7th of June, Larry Hama has turned a sprightly 76 today. Happy birthday, Mr. Hama, if you're watching, as I'm sure you always do.
Do we have any business? Are there any variant covers that we hadn't checked in on that have been revealed? Or A Real American Hero isn't getting second printings. Is there any... you had, Mark, you had that small revelation right after we finished talking about issue 316.
Okay. What was my revelation?
Do you want to say that now, or do you want to say that when we get into 317?
Oh, and I have, Tim, in my hand, printed the special G.I. Joe collectible trading cards, edition number 4. If you see me in person at Joe Fest, you can claim one of those.
Is that Ian Kennedy? Tell us about that image.
This is Ian Kennedy. The painting is somewhere above me as we speak. But I did some work with the Scottish artist Ian Kennedy, and at the almost sprightly age of 90, he painted for me a nice big painting of a G.I. Joe themed picture, and it was sort of inspired by G.I. Joe. I believe it's issue number 5, which has sort of Hawk on the front cover. 4. Damn it.
5 has the tank in Central Park.
Okay. And so it's the image of sort of Hawk and the G.I. Joe crew kind of running towards us as the audience, but it's a bit of a confusing cover in some ways because Hawk has got a beret. Scarlet doesn't quite look herself in some ways. Snake Eyes looks very sort of futuristic with these kind of slightly generic pistols, and Stalker is turned in like he's shooting at his teammates. So there's some weird things going on in that picture. But So yeah, he recreated it, and while doing so, he sort of tweaked it a little bit as well at the same time.
I'm going to break live streaming rules. I'm going to step away from the camera for 4 seconds to make something that's making noise. Stop making noise. While I do that, Mark, you can find the typo on the screen.
Oh no, the typo on screen. Sunday, June 22nd, 2025, 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. Taking Joe with special guest Larry.
And I'm back.
Taking Joe.
Well, you know what? If you and I have a big falling out, and we professionally break up, and you keep talking, Joe, and I start my own podcast, and I try and get the same guests that you're going to get, and post episodes about new issues, 18 hours before you do. I'll call my show Taking Joe, and that way, if people are Googling for your show and they get a letter wrong, they'll come to mine. There
we go. Yeah, it was because I copied and pasted it off of the Joe Fest website. So that's where the typo originates.
Well, we should let the fine folks at Joe Fest know the actual spelling of our podcast. Is it time to talk about 317?
Shout out to Infinite Entertainment. Hello, lads. Good issue this month. Interesting developments. I don't know about you, but I'm really looking forward to seeing Mindbender's next experiment take off. Has he invented a plane? That's a joke about it taking off. And Lark Bark. And hello, good morning, and yo, Joe emoticons. Salute, military, medal, US, thumbs up, okay, smiley. Yeah, so very good. Tim, you're going to have to remember what I remembered after the show. So if it's not a good time now, we can cover it as we go. But
well, we can do it now.
Okay.
No action.
Right. Yes. I observed after we'd wrapped up last time and gave it some thoughts. Quite how that normally Joe's will have something in the issue that is an action sequence of some description, and 316 that we covered last time did not have such an action sequence. So it was quite unusual for a Larry Hama written issue to not have action, even if quite often the shortcut will be that the issue begins in media res in the middle of a an action sequence that we haven't perhaps seen the setup for, or we'll be getting some narration and sort of plot download in the middle of an action scene as people are doing stuff instead of it's just being talking heads. But it was quite a lot of people talking and moving about, wasn't it?
Yeah, no one punched, no one fired a weapon or a missile. The closest thing was in the last issue, Baroness raised a dagger and then didn't do anything with it. And so maybe that's a starting point as a comparison to 317.
Where perhaps some stuff does happen. Right. So we are talking about G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, issue 317. It is brought to us by the creative team of writer Larry Hama, penciler Paul PeleteierInker Tony Kordos, colorist Francesco Segala, with Sabrina Del Grosso, flatter, letterer Pat Brousseau. Alex Antoni is the editor, and publication design comes from Jillian Crab, with production design Richard Mercado. Creative consultant is, as always, Diana Davis. And did you notice, Tim, a little error detected on this contents page or credits page once again?
Oh, yeah, once again. Oh, shoot. G.I. Joe, folks, once again, you are miscrediting colorist Brad Anderson, who is no longer coloring Andy Kubert's covers to G.I. Joe because he is exclusive to Ghost Machine, which is an imprint at Image. This cover is colored by Laura Martin, and her signature, Laura, is visible under Andy Kubert's on the cover. So a light finger wag for 2 months in a row of getting that wrong.
So, speaking of covers,
Let's have a look at the covers in the gallery.
Cover A of G.I. Joe 317 is drawn by Andy Kubert and colored by Laura Martin. Dr. Mindbender in his new Larry Hama designed costume, which Hama revealed on social media 2 weeks back. Mindbender on this cover is a little bit further back than waist up. He's holding a pistol in front of his head with his back is stretched and leaning back. His head is sort of looking down and leering at you as his shoulders are up and taut. This is not a pistol that jumps out at me as a particular G.I. Joe character's pistol. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mark and listeners, viewers, watchers. Behind Mindbender are two Revanche. What are these, Mark?
Yeah, they kind of look a little bit like Revanche cyborg ninjas, but then they've kind of got this Fu Manchu droopy moustache, which kind of visually echoes what's going on with Dr. Mindbender's upper lip. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure quite what's going on with these guys.
So this is not Mark and I criticizing that we can't figure out what these costumes are, who these characters are precisely. I think this is Mark and I indirectly saying that Andy Kubert either here is getting to make up a little bit of what a character might look like, or is showing us a character who we haven't quite yet seen. We have in Chris Mooneyham issues early on in this run seen one or two sort of new Cobra Revanche character designs, and there's this one on page 1 of this very issue. This is not someone who showed up at the end of the IDW run. This is someone who showed up at the beginning of this Skybound run. So these two guys on the cover make me think of that guy. They have some, armor pads on their legs, and their arms are or their forearms and hands are sort of metallic. They have swords, not energy swords, not lightsabers. They have metal swords, and there's a compositional element that is happening in this cover, which is that this cover is very vertical. It's very up and down. Mindbender is standing. He's a little bit diagonal in his pose because of his spine, but Mindbender is very straight up and down. These two soldiers are very straight up and down. Their weight is evenly distributed on both of their legs. Their swords are straight up and down. This is not like how Storm Shadow's swords are on Mike Zeck's cover to issue 45. There are no diagonals here. And then the background is a little nondescript. There are some big circular lights in the top third behind the logo, which makes me think of an operating room, and also makes me think a little bit of a dentist's office, because Dr. Mindbender is a dentist. I think this is more about an operating room where Mindbender has been sort of remade with his the top of half of his head is now a metal dome, right? This is the part of his costume change that I haven't gotten around to yet.
Mm-hmm. It's a literal chrome dome.
Yes, a literal chrome dome. So he's not wearing a helmet. It's not sort of larger than the silhouette of the human head. It is as if the top half of his head has been taken off and replaced by a half of a silver sphere. Mindbender's new costume has sort of metal tech gauntlets, black gloves. He keeps the chain accent from the belt up to his shoulders, which he has chains which pick up the sort of suspenders look of his original costume, and he keeps a bit of his color scheme, black and purple and silver, much less skin showing. He's no longer a shirtless villain with a cape. This is sort of like if you took Dr. Mindbender's 1986 color scheme and sort of ran it through the Brian Hitch Marvel Ultimates filter. And I say that as sort of a fun compliment. That's not me being snide or insulting. The new Mindbender has ribbing, sort of like moto style ribbing on his arms and legs. His boots appear to be the same from the Larry Hama design, although you can't see them on the Andy Kubert cover. And his mustache and his monocle are the same. The color scheme for this cover is a little unusual compared to recent covers, because this room is very red, very pink. The walls are red, the lights are red, and this cover pops in a way that if you have it next to other comics this week or recent issues of A Real American Hero, it looks quite different. I do like this color scheme a lot, and I'm a big Laura Martin fan, but I was wondering if the sort of purple of Dr. Mindbender and this crazy look on his face might have popped a little bit more if the overall color of the background had not been red, which very much agrees with purple, but it had been like orange or yellow or green. But that's just me sort of running at the mouth in my mental picture of what covers might look like with different approaches. Andy Kubert draws a really great kind of crazy face on Mindbender. His eyes are tiny, tiny black dots. The B cover is just his inks, and the inking on these three men, this one man and these two robots. What more can you say that we haven't said about Andy Kubert's technical skill and artistic flair? His changes in line weight, his textures, like what's leather, what's metal, what's flesh, his sense of detail. There's inking detail on these three characters. There's very little inked texture and detail in any of the background behind them. It's a cool cover, and it's a little weird for G.I. Joe because it focuses just on bad guys. And again, like I said, it's so up and down vertical. Cover C is drawn and colored by Francis Portela. This is another of these, quote, camouflage covers where a dominant color of a character's costume sort of matches and becomes the background color, with some edge lines dropped out for sort of dramatic effect. Here's Scarlet with a smirk pointing her crossbow directly at you. There's a great twist to her spine, and background color matches the sort of mustard yellow-orange of her battle togs. And Portela has a really nice balance of the flat color on these camouflage colors, the one color that is flat with no rendering, and then just a little bit of rendering on face, shoulder, hair, weapons, belts. This is a very good example of drawing a female G.I. Joe character, or maybe any female heroic character, who is both attractive and sexy and alluring, but not sort of over sexy, distractingly sort of pinup or cheesecake, right? This is still a pose that a male character in G.I. Joe might take. Scarlet's not like sticking her butt out or like arching her back like a swimsuit model might. And Greg Augustin cracks an amazing pun in the comments with orange you impressed how it's turned out, and yes I am. This is a good, also in terms of sort of not drawing Scarlet as too much of a swimsuit babe pinup. Compare her waist, the narrowest point of her torso, to her neck, and just gonna pick a name out of a hat here. Think of a J. Scott Campbell drawing of Psylocke or Harley Quinn, and you can imagine that neck and waist would be much skinnier, and the waist might even be a little skinnier than the neck. J. Scott Campbell is a great artist, so I'm just taking an easy pot shot here.
I saw on some of the boards that people were sort of complaining that this one was a particularly difficult one to find this time round. So potentially fewer copies are being ordered, and or it's just a particularly in-demand cover that people are being a little bit more drawn towards this cover. So retailer variants this month for 317. We do have Clayton Crane back on on another of his retailer variant covers being sold through his website, which typically do sell very quickly. This is of a Big Joe team, sort of possibly jumping out of, or certainly in front of a tomahawk. And he shared a video, a process video on his Facebook of him creating this image. And I do like seeing Clayton Crane's process videos because it sort of just makes it look so easy, particularly because it is so sped up that you think, wow, it's just sort of this alchemy that he sort of, gets it down on the paper and very confidently and quickly seems to create these images. And he does seem to go at pace in terms of creating quite a lot of outputs in terms of the number of covers that he does do. So obviously the video is very sped up, but I think he does seem to be a particularly confident and efficient painter in terms of producing these sort of images, and nice to see the process as well, because you can see quite the extent to what he is just using, like these analog methods of ink, paint, I think bits of colored pencils to create highlights, and I think with probably a final sheen and touch up digitally at the end of it.
I am not a painter, but I know that some painters start with one or two colors, and if you pay attention to this Clayton Crane time-lapse video, you can see that he's starting with black ink and ink wash, and then he uses a slightly aqua blue, and he's only putting that down, and then he uses this sort of peach color, and he's only putting that down, and then he starts adding, the green of Airtight's helmets, or the sort of red of Wild Bill's collar. And that's a particular approach where you sort of paint in monochrome and you add colors later, which when I see it happen, I think, yeah. But when I think about how I would do that if I was trying to paint, it's like magic to me, and I don't understand it.
And next up, we have John Hebert with the third of his age lineups, the sort of the Marvel Handbook inspired group shots, front and back cover of the G.I. Joe team, primarily on the front cover, and the Cobras on the back. So it's a great year. We see a lot of those iconic characters. Spirit, Recondo, Duke, Ripcord in the back, the Skyhawk, the Deep Six and the Shark, Mutt, Roadblock, Blowtorch, Storm Shadow, Baroness. We see a bit of Destro on the left, Zartan, the Hiss, Scrap Iron, the Rattler. Such a great, one of my favorite, very, very, very favorite years, 84 for the figures released in that particular year.
Something that I like about John Hebert's covers here is that he is inking with a lot of detail in mind on characters' faces and their clothing. There are many, many, many small lines to describe, the edges and folds of fabric. And yet, because there is no background, it's all dropped out white. And because the color is not rendered, there are just two colors per sort of object, right? If you look at Duke's arm, where he's holding a pistol, there are just two colors there. There's the skin tone, and then there's a shadow skin tone for the underside. If you look at a Spirit Iron Knife's shirt, it's the same thing. There are only two blues. There aren't 3, and there aren't 17 across the gradients. And so, as busy as this cover is, it's remarkably decipherable, and that's an important balancing act.
Yeah, he also shared a bit of a process as well on social media, so you could see sort of the just initial concept sketch in rough pencils through to kind of the final coloured version. So it's nice to sort of just see that kind of end-to-end thought process almost of how it was going to be laid out, and you can see that it did evolve somewhat since between producing the original sketch. You can, Storm Shadow is on the right, whereas he ended up being on the left, and they had the Slugger in there, front and center, which I think that dropped out when they got progressed through the stages as well. So fun to see processy stuff there. Next up, we have, I suspect, an Ana de Armas inspired post image here. So she's got her new John Wick spin-off film coming out as we speak, I think. But this particular image is a Baroness. Oh no, I've said it, haven't I? I've said Baroness. Does that mean? Oh dear.
Why are there so many covers of Baroness?
So that is from 616 Comics, and the artist is Cedric Poulat, who did a cover for last issue as well. So you might remember there was that sort of nose art, like belonging to it, like as if it was painted on a bomber with Baroness riding a bomb. And we sort of commented at the time that while it's quite cheesecakey, quite in that vein, it was actually very nicely done. And similarly here, sort of there's while this is maybe a trodden meme, and it's Baroness is certainly had a lot of covers. I think that this is done relatively well, and they've got some interesting touches there, like in terms of how in the detail of the color on her face, it looks like she's got sort of tan lines around where she's been wearing the glasses, and then sort of the underneath the glasses, the sort of eyes are lighter. And I was going to share as well that I did a post on our Patreon where I highlighted the sort of the meme of the "I want you" for Cobra, which has appeared a number of times across lots and lots of different covers. So it was when we were reviewing this G.I. Joe Special Missions Cobra cover for Devil's Due that I prepared, that which had a Cobra one, obviously inspired by the famous World War One Uncle Sam recruitment poster, which in itself was inspired by the Lord Kitchener poster. We had Jason Edmondson, Cobra Wants You, for recruiting for Super 7. And I Want You 2007 JoeCon promo, a HasLab promo of Cobra Commander wanting you for the 2024 HasLab for the Rattler. Operation Raging River has a Cobra Commander pointing at you. It's not the first time we've had Baroness wanting us. She also was pointing at us as depicted by Greg Horn on the cover to Snake Eyes Dead Game. We've had Steve Kurth with both Cobra and G.I. Joe I Want You covers. Some more from Action Force, Flint needing us. Beachhead wanting us on the front cover of Frontline, and Scarlet wanting us for G.I. Joe, as well as some vintage ads with Duke wanting us for G.I. Joe in a couple of different varieties, as well as G.I. Joe looking for a few good men for the Parker Brothers video game adverts, and indeed Cobra Commander looking for a few good men, as well as Baron Ironblood wanting us to buy copies of Action Force Redux, or Cobra, while we're kind of in the Energon universe, Optimus Prime wanting us as well. So it's fun, but it's not necessarily the first time that we've seen this idea, let's say.
It's also funny to me that we're now so many generations removed from the original James Montgomery Flagg painting that I've certainly never seen one of those posters in a museum. Maybe I've seen it in a history book we produced very small in high school. But I only know, I imagine the last 20 years of sort of readers or fans only know the reference, or only know the new version rather than the original reference, in the way that when I was a kid, I didn't know who Groucho Marx was, but I understood that there were the Groucho glasses with the nose and the mustache, and that sometimes Bugs Bunny would sort of put on those glasses or like move like Groucho, but I didn't know it was Groucho, and sort of do a certain walk or like say something in a certain Groucho way and like adjust his glasses. And it was only later that I actually saw a Marx Brothers movie and like photos of the Marx Brothers, and it sort of made sense. And so, let's jump ahead 5 years. How many more? Let's take bets, Mark. In the next 2 years, how many more G.I. Joe covers, variant or otherwise, will refer to this poster? I'm going to say 4.
Really? I will say 0. I think they've done it. They've shot their wad, and they're going to have a moratorium on it. I think in when I posted this originally in the Facebook group, Sam Wells, late of Devil's Due fame, said that they used it a couple of times and then had a moratorium so that they wouldn't overuse it and do it again.
Did you just have a good comment on screen? Can you put that one back on?
Barking Fridge says that he had an Uncle Sam poster on his wall as a teen. Barking Fridge also says we missed the Alfred E. Newman version.
I mean, once
I'm
we're
not trying to be comprehensive across everything. I'm talking about just specifically G.I. Joe. I doubt that Alfred E. Newman wanted us, and was also satirizing G.I. Joe at the same time. But yeah, it across many different things. I'm sure it has been used as an homage. At this point in the show, I'll mention that typically I have been starting the show with some sort of parody song, sort of playing on, sort of parodying a song from the pantheon of musical history and tying into the events of a particular issue. Inspiration and time meant that I didn't actually do that for the first time last time in a long time. Because I've been doing them, I think, pretty much for the entirety of this Skybound era. So, almost 17, and then most of the 10 issues before that as well. So a good chunk, and it sort of did feel like a bit of an omission. And I was thinking to myself just the other day, as walking the dogs, what would be a good song for this issue? And no inspiration was hitting me. It was, until. And this is the way that happens with inspiration sometimes, until it did. And this is the inspiration for this particular issue that hit me.
Duke, this is Wetsuit reporting from Cobra Island. Helix and Multo have been observing goings-on at the casino. They think that Alpha 001 is surgically altering and brainwashing the casino patrons and sending them back to the mainland as sleeper agents. We're here for the long haul, Duke. Over and out.
Sneakiness is an attribute for the professional voyeur of what is known as recon team. A morning swim can be attempted if you disguise yourself as garbage in the returning group that is known as recon team. Joe's got ghillie suits, so he's not intimidated by the dirty androids. They love a bit of it. Team. Who's that fat tourist exploding? You should cut down on your mutagens, mate. Get some antidote. Cobra Island, tourist small lands, they all go hand in hand through their mind wipe. Know what I mean?
There's that.
Very good.
Plot breakdown time.
Plot breakdown.
The Joe team of Muskrat, Helix, Multo, and Wetsuit make a stealthy waterborne recon to Cobra Island, ready to make a surveillance of the Cobra Casino. Meanwhile, in Springfield, the G.I. Joe Ninja Team arrives, disguised as the Steve 241 family. Monty from next door arrives and invites Nina and her grandfather, aka Jinx and Sean, to a Cobra Youth Corps activity at the Senior Centre. Elsewhere, at the Revanche Dome in Baton Rouge, Dr. Mindbender has undergone a transformation, emerging stronger, faster, and with higher brain capacity, plus an updated wardrobe. He tests out his improvements with combat against a series of blue ninjas before talking to Alpha 001 and demanding to continue his work on the cloned Serpentor in a new lab. Their conversation is interrupted by a demutantized casino visitor glitching out. They are terminated, and Alpha 001 erases the memories of the guests that saw it. The G.I. Joe team, however, did see it, and they report back to Duke. Elsewhere, in Scotland, Destro proposes a deal to Cobra Commander. Destro speeds along his negotiation with Cobra Commander via a bit of torture, with a remote control that triggers pain receptors. There we go, Tim. 317.
So my broad strokes reaction to this issue is that a lot of things happened. It's a little bit like the previous issue. There isn't no fighting or action, but there is just a little bit of fighting and action. An old lady's head gets blown up, but it turns out that she's some kind of cyborg. And there's a little detail that you folks may have missed, which makes her execution less horrible and more acceptable. And then there's this half-page sequence of Destro and the Baroness zapping, torturing Cobra Commander, pick your verb. But otherwise, as with the previous issue, characters move from one place to another. Characters change clothes. Both Joe, both Joe and Mindbender in this issue change clothes, and it's funny because we are so many issues away from the sort of the long plot that we had in, I don't know, like 291 to 300, or 287 to 300 with the casino on Cobra Island. And here we are back at the casino on Cobra Island. And this is not a criticism. This is not me saying, Larry Hama is out of ideas. He keeps, doubling back. I think this is something that happens. I think this is something that is interesting him. And so he wants to go back. And also, like we mentioned in the last episode, sometimes for Joes take a long time getting back across the Gulf of Mexico. And then you immediately send them back across the Gulf of Mexico, back to Cobra Island, because, they are the best intelligence gathering operatives for the job. So it's not. I've used this term before, and it is an imperfect term, and I don't want to overuse it. But I think some issues of G.I. Joe feel like transition issues, where we're between a big fight and a big fight, or we're building up to an anniversary issue, or characters are moving into place and discovering some things, but the thing that they're discovering hasn't yet climaxed. It hasn't reached a peak. And this is not to say that such issues are inherently less interesting or less valuable. But, Hama has said, and we have reiterated that, he writes this comic where there's an A plot and a B plot, and they're progressing. And then, an issue or two later, there's a C plot that starts. And then an issue or two later, the A plot wraps up, and the B plot becomes the A plot, and the C plot becomes the B plot. And then he introduces a new C plot. And this issue is a good example of that, because we have the recon team, we have the ninjas back in Springfield, and then we have Mindbender. I take that back. There was one more bit of fighting in this issue where Mindbender struts his stuff, shows off his new abilities, and beats up some blue ninja. So yes, it is not like last issue where there's no action. There are 3 different kinds of action in this issue, but it does not feel like a big action issue. Mark, do you have any overall reactions?
Yeah, it's a similar sort of idea, I think, is my high level reaction to this. And I think this, when I was talking about sort of creating my little parody song and sort of struggling initially for inspiration, I think part, and same with last time, part of that is that there's a few things happening and they're all doing their little bit of moving the plot along. So it's harder to say what is the main focus of this issue, what is the main sort of takeaway. I guess possibly it's the new look of Dr. Mindbender and his new togs, given that he's on the cover and he does have a little bit of real estate. But I felt that the more interesting story point perhaps was the recon team, which is why I focused in on that.
I am surprised that there wasn't a variant cover of this issue using that Larry Hama sketch of Mindbender's costume. And I might be thinking too literally by comparison, where is it 246 from the IDW run where Larry...
The Dawn cover.
Yes, Larry Hama had sketched Don Marino's G.I. Joe costume, and he'd colored it in too. So there's some black and there's some red, and he had some call outs on it. And, all the background is just white paper. And maybe everyone likes the ninja and the new female character who is very much like Snake Eyes. And, Mindbender is not as much of a draw, even though he's an established character. So, maybe Skybound crunched some numbers and thought, this isn't so valuable of an image, such an exciting change for this issue that we should make a variant cover of it. Or maybe they said, IDW did that. We don't need to do it necessarily what they did.
Perhaps it's a shame though that they didn't stick it in the back of the book, so that we've got it there as a official part of the published comic.
Maybe someone needs to send an email to editor Alex Antone. Antone runs with phone, and say, hey, who designed Dr. Mindbender's new costume? And then he can, insert it very small in one of these columns. All right, so just going chronologically in the issue, the very first page, the very first panel, I thought, okay, I've got a good comparison here. So I've spoken at length about how much I like the colors of Francesco Segala on the Skybound Real American Hero, not overdoing it with rendering and highlights. A lot of a mixture of both muted colors and also some fun sort of popping like purples and oranges. A little bit of old school feeling with these dot textures. And so here on the very first panel of this issue, we've got a Cobra moray in the Gulf of Mexico around Cobra Island at night, shining a light. And I thought, we saw a scene just like this back in issue. I'm holding it up. Here's my B cover, 287. This was the issue drawn by Billy Penn. So the panel we're looking at right now is from page 3 of 287. And rather than frown at the work of Jay Brown on the IDW coloring, I'll just once again smile and put my eyebrows up for how much I love the coloring of Francesco Segala. But here's a comparison. In the IDW run, everything is bright and everything has some rendering on it. And there are definitely some light sources in this panel because the moon is somewhere up in the sky. And then there are these two spotlights going sideways from the Cobra moray. I find that red and the side gray, and then even the highlights on the water. It's a very busy panel. And between all the details on the moray and all the inking on the water, I really like Billy Penn's work. I really like his use of spotted blacks in his issue. And you compare that to the Paul Pelletier, Tony Kordos, Francesco Segala panel, and it's not a perfect comparison because this is not a dramatic diagonal, shot of, but it's the same things are happening, and there's just less. There's a place for my eye to rest in this scene as drawn by and colored by a different set of artists. Okay. So once again, I just really, really appreciate the work that Francesco Segala does, not just on Paul Pelletier, but also on Chris Mooneyham on this series. And hey, I spy a lamprey who we have seen now and then, But, every time we see a particular G.I. Joe or Cobra vehicle, I've always got my fingers crossed that we're going to see their specific designated driver or pilot.
Mm. And yeah, interestingly, I guess Cobra Island is under the command of Alpha 001, specifically with his Blue Ninjas, who is the co-pilot of the hydrofoil here. But, there's also a Cobra in a distinctive Cobra outfit there with the lamprey there. I was just going to say, there's a moon in the sky, and that's Amore. Do
you need a backup song for this
we
issue?
don't need to.
Wow, that's great. So while I'm thinking about color, if you turn the page,
Larry Hama does a very Larry Hama thing, which is make sure that your characters introduce themselves. So everyone here report. Muskrat here, Helix here, Multo here. That's all of us. Wetsuit, move out. We're already behind schedule.
So it's a little conspicuous, but there's not a lot of new people picking up. This issue 317 is not a lot of people's first G.I. Joe comic, but you never know. And this is just the way that Hama writes. And
also in this issue, these characters aren't necessarily dressed in particularly distinctive outfits necessarily all of the time. So it helps.
So, but something that I really like in terms of color on this page 2, is that all 4 Joes are in wetsuits, but Wetsuit gets his specific costume. He gets his orange and blue or orange and aqua and light gray costume, even though you only see a tiny bit of it because of how they're poking out of the water. And the other 3 Joes are in sort of Torpedo's outfit, or a generic, less specialized, more camouflaged costume. And that's just a small thing that I really appreciate, because I always want Joes to be in their costumes as much as possible, even if they're going to be, underwater or in the Arctic or sneaking around at night, even if they're going to be covered in ghillie suits. I still want to see their specific costumes, because part of me is thinking, that's so much of what makes this character. Their details, their color scheme, their gear, and this comparison that I think of. Is it issue? I can't remember. Is it issue 7 during the Chuck Dixon run at IDW? There's a Robert Atkins cover, and it's got 2 Joes, and I actually forget who it is, but it's like Wetsuit and Grunt, or like Grunt and Lowlight, and it's just 2 Caucasian guys without facial hair in like very cool modern 2010 green like army gear, and I don't know who they are, because one of them doesn't have anything that says like, no, I'm the guy with like the yellow pouches and like the blue gun and like the red helmet, and so I understand that butts up against the realism of characters in combat and actual environmental concerns. So here, where they've taken off their costumes to put on their ghillie suits, I appreciate that. Even for just one panel, we get like a little bit of Helix's yellow battle togs. So besides her hair, I can say, hey, there's Helix wearing the Helix stuff. This is another Larry Hama thing on this page 3, and I guess page 4 also. Yeah. Where the Joes are saying what they're doing. Yeah. And it's not like, Mark, was it 1 or 2 issues ago where they all called out their very specific weapons?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And here they're calling out sort of what their submission is, So Multo, when you and Helix return, you'll set up comms while Muskrat and I take our turns at the surveillance site, right? It's going back a panel. We have heat wave disruptive netting and anti-infrared mylar linings for the ICS tents, right? This is Larry Hama both enjoying figuring out, or like having to figure out what gear they would be using, and also sharing it with us, because this comic has always been about gear and accessories. And if you don't believe me, just remember what it says on the back of every single G.I. Joe vehicle box, right? It's this kind of missile and this kind of air intake and this kind of, tank tread.
Yeah. So we know, for example, that Helix has got an ART, an automatic ranging telescope, mounted on her Mic 2.1, and that means that she can zoom on anything that Multo spots with his wide-angle binocs, I guess. A lot of kind of that technical kind of gear-specific stuff that you either love or can't stand about Larry's way of doing things. And then we are back in Springfield with the Ninja team making their insertion back in there. We sort of had the setup last time with the Iron Grenadier sort of paying attention to the comings and goings of what's in those houses, and this is kind of the payoff of that, really. And I guess set up and resolved relatively quickly. They are able to get back into the house without too much challenge there, but it's an elegant way of reminding us of the plot point of what's going on. That the Ninja team getting back into Springfield and being checked up on as they do it. Last time round, I sort of queried this point about Jinx being Nina. The hairstyle and makeup will do the trick, but glasses will help. And indeed, this time round, she is wearing glasses, which is, I guess, disguising the unique way that her eyes would look versus the real Nina.
I'm going to jump back 1 minute for myself. I'm going to fact check there's a cover from 2009. It's issue 13 of the Chuck Dixon IDW G.I. Joe, and it's a cover by Robert Atkins, which I just emailed to you, Mark, and you don't have to put it on the screen. It's okay. I'm sorry. And it's an awesome looking Joe, and I can't tell who it is, next to Beachhead, who I definitely know is Beachhead, and that's all. Okay. When I got to this panel, this page, I thought, okay, well, Sean's wearing a mask. Did Scarlett cut her hair? And then I thought, it's Snake Eyes who's Steve, right?
Yeah. Snake Eyes is the main Crimson Guardsman. Who?
Okay.
I didn't think about it. I didn't get my jingle ready or anything for Snake Eyes talking, but he actually does quite a lot of talking here, doesn't he?
Yes.
He looks very different, and he's doing a lot of chatting, which I guess subconsciously I didn't sort of make the connection. Go, oh yeah, this is definitely Snake Eyes as I was reading this. Although thinking about it, clearly it is.
Yes, because there's no panel that sort of reminds you one more time. Snake Eyes is disguised as the dad, as the Crimson Guardsman, or there's no panel where he's like just for a moment putting on his Snake Eyes mask and visor, and he's got several word balloons here, and I thought, okay, is this Larry Hama getting more, I don't think the word is comfortable. I think Hama's already comfortable with this. Exercising more this idea that listener Squishy says Snake Eyes is super chatty this month. So I think Hama is either just exercising this ability that Snake Eyes can now talk. So why doesn't he talk that much more? Or Mark and I had noticed that new Snake Eyes, since he came back from the dead, doesn't talk a lot. He tends to say sort of one sentence at a time, sometimes just sort of one sentence per issue, and it sort of impacts because what he's saying, he's not chatty. And I thought, is this because he's sort of playing a role here? Because it's still Snake Eyes. He's still as a Joe in disguise, telling the other Joes in disguise what they're doing. And I think some of this just sort of ends up being not out of necessity because, Dawn and Storm Shadow are hiding and, while they're driving in the car, he's sort of taking the lead. Anyway, I noticed it and I'm still getting used to Snake Eyes talking. And as the aforementioned friend of the show, Nick Nadell, who's a producer in New York and who is editing my G.I. Joe book, said to me when talking about this run of issues, I will never get used to talking Snake Eyes. And I don't think that's a major criticism. I think that's more an observation. And I share that feeling. I will never get used to talking Snake Eyes.
They're doing the setup. They're sort of checking for the ninjas were in the trunk. You know, super stealthy ninja action, just hiding out in the trunk of the car, as Greg points out. And then Dawn is doing a check for sort of surveillance and sort of countering that, and talk about it as she goes. And then there's a knock on the door, and it is the neighbor kid who is called, what is he called? Monty. I had a couple of thoughts about seeing Monty. One of which was it's the first time that we've seen Cobra Youth in a very, very long time. I think possibly the last time we saw the actual uniform itself might have been in that issue where there was the Cobra rally and Billy was going to try and assassinate
is that 32?
His father. That's
with the Mike Zick cover with a hand pointing a pistol at Cobra Commander.
That one. 33.
33. Okay. Mark, did when Dawn Marino was introduced back in 226, 229, she's a high school student in Springfield. Does she have a Cobra uniform, or is it the high school uniform or the lacrosse sports team uniform?
When we first see her, she's playing lacrosse, like a lacrosse sort of trial out. So I think that is.
We're not seeing this.
We've never seen her in this particular uniform, as far as I can recall. So
and the reference here for the Cobra Youth, what is it? Cobra Youth Brigade? It's like Boy Scouts or excuse me, Scouts.
Yeah.
Because it's got the collar and oh, there we go. Right. So Billy was brainwashed, right? Back in 33. He's going to shoot his dad, who he didn't know was his dad.
Well, he wasn't properly brainwashed, wasn't he? He was just led in a particular way by the Baroness and Major Blood, sort of slightly leading him astray.
In our last episode, not on Real American Hero, in our last just episode, Energon Universe issue 7, I called out a panel on the first page that I really liked, where artist Andrea Milana put the camera behind an important prop and tilted the camera. Right, this isn't film. There's no camera. It's comics, but forgive me. The point of view at an angle to emphasize something. A shredder, and Pelletier is not inventing this. This is not supremely innovative and brilliant. This is just good, basic visual storytelling in comics or film. But on this page, on panel 2, when Snake Eyes in disguise opens the door, the quote camera is at Monty's height, and we're looking a little bit up at Snake Eyes, and we're behind Monty. So we are from Monty's point of view. So we're seeing Snake Eyes in disguise, sort of nervous, cautious, opening the door. Hello? And then for the second panel, or the third panel of the page, the camera reverses angle. And now we're Snake Eyes' point of view. We're looking down at Monty. We're seeing what Snake Eyes sees. We're seeing what in disguise Crimson Guardsman Steve sees. And it's just a small visual reminder that character poses and acting, composition, and again, it's not a film, but camera placement is what moves the story along visually. And then on the bottom of this page, can you go back to the full view of the page or scroll all the way down? There's a little bit of wordless visual storytelling that I like. And sometimes when we talk about visual storytelling, wordless visual storytelling in G.I. Joe, we immediately go to issue 21, Silent Interlude, or we think of a series of panels or pages in a row, like a fight scene with no dialogue. And this is all happening in one panel. So it's not sequential, but it's just a nice bit of business that I'm guessing is in Larry Hama's plot and not maybe Paul Pelletier followed the lead or maybe invented it himself. But here, the camera is now back far away from the front door as Snake Eyes in Disguise closes it. And we reestablish that Storm Shadow and Dawn Moreno are in the foreground of the panel, but they're hiding behind a wall. Like, they can't be seen. So they have successfully gotten out of the car, gotten out of the garage, and it's just a good reminder, right? I can sort of almost hear Larry Hama saying to Paul Pelletier to reestablish that Snake Eyes and Dawn are there, that they didn't like get stuck in the garage, right? But that they still have to be careful because everyone is surprised by this knock on the door, but they're the ones who can't be seen. So I thought, neat. And then also, in terms of, I always want characters to be in costume. Even though Storm Shadow's a Joe and should not have a Cobra insignia on his chest, every time I see, for years, Storm Shadow in his white ninja uniform without a red Cobra logo on his chest, I think, well, there should be something there. And it would probably look silly if it was the Joe, star and stripes or like eagle from the movie logo, but something. I wish there was something.
Yeah, conspicuous gap that needs filling. And Greg points out that Storm Shadow here, as he has for the last little while, he's been appearing in his original Cobra Assassin togs without the logo, so that sort of V1 Storm Shadow look rather than your urban camo or your ninja force or anything like that. I think that's a good suggestion, Justin. Justin Taylor suggesting just stick on a Arashikage hexagram there. Why not? That could work.
Mark, this panel that I'm talking about, you drew 3 rectangles. What point are you making here with these sort of 3 outlines?
I'm just sort of noting that they're sort of paying attention and tracking to the sort of different, I guess, panes that we've got of action here in this particular scene. That outside and blurred, we've got the 3 characters outside. So Sean in the wheelchair and Nina and I guess the neighbor. And looking out of the window is Scarlet and Snake Eyes, and the body language is sort of conveying a little bit of, I guess, nervousness perhaps about quite what's going on. And then in the immediate foreground on the third pane, we've got Dawn and Snake and Storm Shadow. So it's a small panel, but it's doing quite a lot in terms of showing these parallel kind of activities between this group. The other thought that I had about this particular scene was the fact that Monty does look like an annoying, inquisitive neighbor getting in your business, and Nina is going to need, aka Jinx, is going to need to be on her very best kind of disguising to keep up the pretense of being that neighbor that probably Monty has spent a long time annoying over the course of the previous time.
Yes. Who's Eddie Haskell? That's the neighbor kid on Leave It to Beaver.
Okay.
And I wonder if in writing this Monty character, Larry Hama is thinking a little bit of Eddie Haskell. Yeah, when I got to this panel, I thought, okay, this is where the Joes have to be careful with what they say, because if Monty's their neighbor, he knows them, or some of them. So he might inadvertently ask some innocuous question and they answer wrong, something like, oh, let's go to the soccer field. It's like, where's that? And then Monty thinks, oh, Nina plays soccer. Why doesn't she know where the soccer field is? They're Joes. They've infiltrated. Okay.
So next up, we're in Baton Rouge with Dr. Mindbender, who's been through a dramatic transformation, given a new wardrobe, as well as new improvements and add-ons. He has an unarmed martial arts chip, a targeting suite, a wireless link to the Revanche mainframe banks. And I guess they've got this sort of combat sequence of him demonstrating his new capabilities. How do you feel about Dr. Mindbender suddenly being not just a intellectual threat, but also quite a significant, super bad physical threat?
It doesn't immediately work for me, but it is given a logical reason. And Hama has demonstrated over and over that he is going to use Dr. Mindbender. And, in the letters page, someone even votes for a return of characters like Major Blood. And I think, how would this scene feel differently if this was, Major Blood or Scrap Iron or Tomax? And I'm not that interested in seeing Mindbender fighting, but it does make sense that he could suddenly fight. And, now that I think about it, with his original shirtless uniform, he had muscles.
Yep. To put a look like that, you've either got to be pretty, pretty physically stacked and buff, or just like super body confident.
Yeah. Because in the movie, in a live action movie, think of like tall, skinny, gaunt, eggheads, scientists, characters or actors that you've seen in sci-fi movies, action movies. You're not thinking of like the Vin Diesel or the Schwarzenegger sort of torso. But anyway, even the Squishy says Mindbender's upgrade will be okay as long as there is a payoff down the road. I'm not thrilled yet, but not ready to cry foul. And then Greg Augustin says, is that a teeny robotic arm for the monocle? And I think the answer is yes, that's a teeny robotic arm for the monocle. So when I turned this page, I thought, okay, even though colorist Francesco Segala is eased off a little bit after working with Andrew Crunkey and Mooneyham, who wanted, sort of like less crazy, there are still color shifts in every scene. So this Mindbender scene in Baton Rouge is very blue, and the recon team in Springfield in the previous pages was very yellow. But I see this unusual tank box, surgical unit, that's what it's called, that Mindbender comes out of. And I was sort of wondering if Larry Hama's plot described the effect as Kirby crackle, but also maybe nanites, because it's sort of not clear to me what physically is happening, like a bunch of robot arms or like blue ninjas wearing, white lab coats with face masks and holding scalpels. I'm trying to remember was there a setup for this? Did we see a panel in the previous issue, Mark, of Mindbender, like lying down on an operating table and then a bunch of like scary pointy things?
Yeah, I think so. Mm-hmm.
But I thought that this was a cool visual. I just sort of wanted more information about, is it like comic book electricity magic that's transforming him into this new body with upgrades? Okay, so now you can go forward to this page. I do appreciate that if we're not going to get... thank you. All right. Folks, if you're listening to this, Mark did just pull up a page from last issue 316 showing what I just remembered, half remembered and described, which is Mindbender laying on a surgical table with pointy things aiming at him. So I do appreciate if we're not going to get this sort of variant cover with Larry Hama's sketch. Larry Hama does give Paul Pelletier a full third of a page to present us with Mindbender in his new costume in a sort of, partial pinup panel where you can just see his costume without anything in the way, without shadows or...
Yeah, and Mindbender as a character in the comics, in their particularly the ARAH universe, has really mostly just had one look, which is that V1 with the bare chest, the suspenders / braces, codpiece and purple trousers, etc. Towards the end of the run, when Mindbender returned from the death as a revived clone Mindbender, they did have briefly they used this battle core look, which is got these yellow and sort of purple accents and more futury, more cyborgy kind of and massive weapon sprue with the toy, of course, but not used a huge amount in the actual comic.
Yeah, he shows up right around Transformers, right? The appearance. But I think you just said two ideas that are related, and we can connect them. The only reason that Hama brought Mindbender back from the dead as a clone is because, surprise, he'd killed off the character and Hasbro had a new toy. And suddenly he needed to include the new toy.
And then other versions of the character, just to mention as well, I've not prepared images for these, include like the sort of lab coat kind of design that Devil's Due used a lot, which was made into a toy sort of during that kind of Venom versus Valor era. He's also had a look where he's in a kind of that, I think it might be a purple winter coat that's sort of similar to kind of how he appeared in the Arctic in G.I. Joe the movie, that kind of thing. But in terms of ARAH outfits, it's certainly the V.
Were there a few issues in the 260s at IDW where did Dr. Venom's brain get put into Dr. Mindbender's body? And so Dr. Mindbender put on a wig and sort of dressed up like Dr. Venom.
That's right, yeah.
Which, I mean, if you look at Dr. Venom's costume, it's not all that different from Dr. Mindbender's costume. Okay, so then we get this, it's actually 2+ pages of Hama letting Mindbender show us, the reader, his new skills. And it's a fun scene, and I do wonder about this page that we're looking at, where one of the blue ninjas fires a flamethrower at Mindbender, and he says, "Doesn't faze me." But in that panel where the flame is hitting him, he's not covering his face with his arm. He doesn't have his hand sort of in the way, and I thought, well, yeah, he's wearing like fire retardant clothing, but wouldn't his face have gotten a little burned or singed? I mean, his mustache, his eyebrows. But because Paul Pelletier's silhouette next to this whoosh sound effect clearly shows Mindbender walking forward, but not with an arm in front of his face. But I'll allow it. I understand what's happening, even if the panel doesn't exactly show it.
And this sort of sequence does feel a little bit tropey at this point as well from Hama. It's a kind of idea that he's used quite a few times in terms of establishing a new big bad or a new look and sort of showing how cool it is. So in the last few issues, we've had it a few times for sure that we were introduced to Betty, the casino bot, towards the end of the IDW run, and they were sort of showing off her capabilities and, opening up her arm and firing out bits from her arm, and then she's, this new unstoppable kind of force until she's not. And then the new mutant blue ninjas as the new big bad, and how badass they are in combat and demonstrating their capabilities until they're not. And even Snake Eyes sort of establishing his kind of new look and new gear loadout with the visor for that issue a few issues back, which had Snake Eyes on the front cover, sort of surrounded by cobras on the ground and stuff. A training combat sequence showing off his badassness and his new kit. And there's, I'm sure, more that I'm not remembering. So it does feel again like a kind of a familiar kind of comfort blanket area of establishing a new look and sort of testing out those capabilities and showing how bad a particular character is, and until it maybe that level of power is quietly forgotten about.
When this, I've sort of said what I have to say about this scene and Mindbender's new costume. I do wonder if, as the classified toy line finishes up redoing all of the 1982 to 1994 G.I. Joe costumes, will it look to any of the updated costumes that only appeared in a comic book? And this would be a fun design to see at the 6-inch scale. When we go to the next page, so we're back on Cobra Island, and we're now seeing up close what the recon team is seeing, but we don't know yet until we turn a page that the recon team is seeing this. And there's this there's two interesting things that are happening here. One is in writing and drawing and color. In the first panel on this page, it says, on Cobra Island, and you see the weird, scary sort of metal snake shape of Alpha 001. And it says, I am your host, Alpha 001, and I hope you enjoyed your stay at ARAH Casino and Resort. And so this is objective. This is what is actually happening. Tourists are coming out of the casino and they're about to get on a bus. And then in the next panel, with a similar word balloon treatment, Alpha 001 continues, and we certainly hope you all tell your friends about the wonderful time you had. But now, instead of being drawn as this metal robot snake with a scary face, it's drawn like a tourist attraction social guide. You know, like the guy who works at the hotel who like leads you down to the beach to show you all the amenities, right? Beard, mustache.
It looks a bit like a cravatted Adam West Batman with an extra beard.
Bruce Wayne, not Batman.
Bruce Wayne, obviously.
Yes.
Yeah.
This man looks like he works at a hotel that's in the warm weather, but he has this sort of glowing light aqua field around him, and he is sort of colored in these blue aqua tones. And in this second panel, everyone around him is in these pink tones. And so there are two sets of things happening here. One is that in the storytelling, we're switching back and forth between the objective reality of a giant metal snake telling these brainwashed people, cyborgs, that they're going to go home and things are nice. And then we have the subjective view of what they see. They're not seeing this scary robot snake. They're seeing this man, the social host, who's leading them back on the bus. But also, color artist Francesco Segala is imbuing this whole scene in pinks because, every 3 pages, when we move to a different location, he picks a different color to be the dominant color, and why not pink? And B, I think this is a reaction to the pink color of the whole casino building in and of itself. And I keep forgetting that the Cobra Casino is pink, but you flip back to page 5 of this issue, when the Joes have first put on their ghillie suits and are starting to get into position right at the tree line. Tree line's closer to the casino than I thought. Line of sight is better. And they're looking through binoculars and rifle scopes to see up close. And I keep forgetting, speaking of the color work of Jay Brown from the IDW run, I don't know if the color of the casino came from a Larry Hama plot from who drew the casino in the first place? Actually, was it? I'm picking up issue 287 by Billy
I think
Penn.
it was Billy Penn introducing it, and then
yes, here it is.
Gallant.
You want to go full screen on me?
Rounding it out. I think when we spoke to Billy, he said that he didn't really understand why they made it pink.
Okay, so yes, the casino is being built in issue 287. And you know what? I'm going to interrupt myself. Folks, we keep referring to these final 15 or so issues of the IDW run, and if you don't have them and you want to buy them, did you know I own a comic book store? And we have many issues of A Real American Hero from the IDW run for sale, and more than one copy. So if you're listening to this episode right now, and you're thinking, I've got some money to spend, I'm a G.I. Joe fan, I need to complete my run. Maybe you can only get 5 issues or 10 issues or 30 issues, right? Maybe you can't afford 150 issues all at once. And we don't have all 150 from IDW. We are missing a few. But if you're thinking, well, by the time this episode's been out for a while, someone else will have contacted Hub Comics, Tim Finn's comic book store in Massachusetts, and they'll have done an informal mail order, or they'll convince Tim Finn to bring a couple issues from the IDW run to Joe Fest in Augusta. I couldn't possibly get those issues because they'll be gone. Folks, we have more than one copy of many of these issues, and you don't know till you ask. So send us an email or call the store. Okay, because I really do want to sell G.I. Joe comics to G.I. Joe fans who want G.I. Joe comics. Okay, end of interruption. So at the time, the pink casino seemed really garish and weird, but I'm kind of getting into it now. And in this scene, Francesco Segala uses the pink of the building as sort of the driving decision to, well, I'll just color all these tourists who were leaving the building in pinks, as if that's just not as if it's a light source, but kind of as if it's a light source. The way that, the Joes in the woods, that's all sort of green aqua, and the Joes in the recon team, that's all sort of, yellow and orange. And so what a funny opportunity that this weird color of this building presents.
The other interesting, you say, sort of, but like the objective reality of the giant slug Alpha 001 being viewed by the recon team as per the first panel, and the sort of, much more robot-y accents on his speech bubble. The second panel sort of shows a humanoid kind of character, which is how these casino goers are perceiving him, but also the speech bubble is rounded like a human voice as well, so that's a nice touch. It's not explicitly said, I don't think, about how he's achieving this, and maybe it's a combination of like hollow projector technology, but if the Joes aren't seeing that, maybe not. Possibly it's more of a mind control thing that all of these casino goers have gone through, a kind of a slight brainwashing and
chips, right? If
exactly.
Mindbender,
so he's able to influence what they're perceiving.
Yes, he is transmitting something to their brains in the same way that Mindbender, both in this issue and in the last issue, there's this sort of subplot that Alpha 001 has put something inside Mindbender, not just to enhance him, but to control him. So then on page, I think it's 13, maybe Squishy, viewer Squishy says, the next page is mind-blowing, quite literally. And then the weirdest thing maybe to ever happen in a G.I. Joe issue happens, which is this lady, this tourist lady who's got a hat you'd wear at the beach and sunglasses and a leopard print beach dress. And she's got a wedding ring and her nails are painted and she's wearing lipstick and she's got earrings and she's very happy. And she says, "Oh, Mr. Alpha, everything." Oh, and there's another reminder of this difference between subjective and objective reality, right? These tourists think that this is Mr. Alpha, Richard Alpha or Jonathan Alpha or whatever it is. Not Alpha 001. "Oh, Mr. Alpha, everything about this resort is amazing. We're going to tell all our friends," and then her head twists 180 degrees and also cocks backwards. You can tell her neck is definitely snapping, and she's vomiting what I can only describe as sort of the white foam when someone in a movie is like, sick or has rabies, or has a drug overdose.
Like she's a human foam fire extinguisher.
And then we see it continue to happen from Dr. Mindbender's point of view on a screen as he's talking to Alpha 001, and it's happening over Alpha 001's shoulder in the distance as she's flailing. And I really want to read the sentence where Larry Hama in his plot is describing sort of what is happening and how it continues to happen for artist Paul Pelletier. And then one of the hostesses shoots her in the head with a... Is it a laser? Is it a little rocket? I
think it's a mini rocket, yeah, that's hidden away in her wrist.
Foosh, lump. And then Mr. Alpha, right, as they see it, says to the witnesses, the tourists who've just seen all this happen right in front of themselves, says, "You will all erase the last 2 minutes from your memories. Thank you." And she's in the background, on her knees, sort of slumped over with smoke coming out of her sort of neck stump. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is page 14. panel 5. Here's why it's not as horrible and disgusting. It's just kind of weird and horrible. When we see it all in red through Helix's scope, and she says, "Are you clocking this, Molto?" The little bit of spine that's popping out of the neck of this resort person. Paul Pelletier has drawn it, and Tony Kordos has inked it like it's metal. And there are 2 wires coming out of it. And I thought, okay, a lot more of these people has been replaced by robot parts than just, one microchip implant. And then I thought, oh wait, is artist Paul Pelletier sort of exaggerating, extrapolating too much? Is this like not actually in Larry Hama's plot, that they're really just sort of brainwashed people? Well, did an issue or 2 ago, did their quote enhancements, were those specified? So if you're worried about this comic book being too gory, right? There's a lot of orange and red on these pages, but it's because we're looking at sort of heat signatures, and there's like the fire of a rocket blowing up. It's not gushing blood. And if it's okay to kill a robot and less okay to kill a person, well, this is a robot. So, Mark, any thoughts on this sequence?
Yeah, it was, a little bit surprising to see, quite unusual. Yeah, I guess I was probably relatively shocked for at this sequence appearing in G.I. Joe. I didn't necessarily pick up the thought that maybe she's less than human. And also, I guess, given what is happening to her head, you could probably also look at it, the case, slightly less of a case of maybe the casino bots blowing off her head and possibly more putting her out of her misery as well, that possibly it's a little bit more humane than just a pure head explosion murder. But
Hostess 023 really is the hero of this scene for making sure that this casino goer wasn't suffering, and that she died happy. She died thinking that, as she said, everything about this resort is amazing, and we're going to tell all our friends.
And it sort of it's followed up later on with the Joes reporting back to Duke and establishing this plot that may become a thing, or might not necessarily lead to a huge amount of extra things happening, but I guess it gives something in the armory for Hama to call back on, which is that the Joes want to follow up on finding out the addresses of all of the returning tourists and kind of figuring out what happens to them on their return.
And in the final panel of page 19, Wetsuit. I don't know which one. They're both so cool. They wear the same things. If only one had a beard. Anyway, or an eye patch, or a dog, or parrots. Anyway, Muskrats, or it's probably Wetsuit. Anyway, says, we think Alpha 001 is surgically altering and brainwashing the casino patrons and sending them back to the mainland to be sleeper agents. Okay, so let's talk about this.
And it does say, to be fair, Duke, we've got Wetsuit reporting in from Cobra Island,
yes.
and Duke says, "What's this wetsuit?" So, Hama is helping us to figure out who these people are when they are looking very similar.
Good, thank you.
And then I guess the other bit of the plot that we've not yet talked about is Cobra Commander and Destro in Scotland.
So
In
the previous issue, we noted how forgiving the Baroness was of Cobra Commander's assassination attempt, and this awkward dinner that they had, and then this opportunity that she had to murder Cobra Commander. And Cobra Commander has many times turned on Destro and the Baroness, and they should definitely murder him. But despite all that forgiveness, while you were under anesthesia to deal with your wounds, we implanted remote neuron triggers in a number of nervous system nodes. Lots of people getting metal technological things getting put in their bodies. Tourists off the coast of Florida and Cobra Commander. And we're sort of reminded in the letters page about metal things being put in Destro's hands, which we thought maybe had been forgotten. And that's it. So we're seeing Cobra Commander. His costume is torn up a bit. We had noted in our discussion of issue 316 that Cobra Commander, having just been in this knockdown, drag-out fight with Destro, back in the States, looked okay. And creative consultant on this very series, Diana Davis, helped us out with a clarification in the comments that Cobra Commander, his eyeglasses were supposed to have a crack, but the color, Francesco Segala, for all of my praise, didn't quite catch that. And so it just sort of looked like sort of reflection lines in the glasses, not an actual crack. I was really hoping we'd see a close-up here and I could see some cracked John Lennon glasses on Cobra Commander. But anyway.
He does have, holes in his trousers and in his beret, even.
Yeah.
Bottom left-hand panel.
His trench coat is frayed, and he's got a hole by his elbow. And so Hama checks in just for 2 pages with the Destro Cobra Commander Baroness plot, but withholds a lot of information because Cobra Commander says the details of the deal you are proposing, Destro, unacceptable. I will not agree to it. And do we know actually what the deal is? Was it a hypothetical in the previous issue where someone said, "Oh, he's gonna make Cobra Commander turn"?
I think he said,
over.
We're going to need to talk about the terms of our, deal or something like that. So we don't know what that deal is.
So Larry Hama either wants to hold it off for another issue, doesn't know what it is yet, because he makes up this stuff as he goes along each page, figuring out what's happening on the page that he's on and not thinking so much about the next page or the pages after. And then the Baroness and Destro and we, the terrible bloodthirsty readers, we get some revenge. We get to see Cobra Commander have some comeuppance because he gets zapped. And then, as a contrast to this forgiveness that Destro, this patience and forgiveness that Destro and the Baroness exercised in the previous issue, and it's played as a joke. It's played for humor. That we get to really enjoy. Hama wants us to enjoy Cobra Commander's extreme discomfort and Destro pushing this button and electrifying, right? Not electrocuting. Electrocuting means to kill by electrical shock, right? It's sort of like the difference between like murder and like shoot, right? Sometimes people misuse the word electrocute, and I want to push back on that. If you rub a blanket and then like touch your elbow or your couch and you get an electric shock, you have not been electrocuted. Okay.
And yeah, it's more than just discomfort. The triggers are in pain reception centers and induce a magnitude of agony quite beyond normal perception.
And Cobra Commander says it is excruciating. And so Destro says, "This is quite unpleasant. Should I stop?" And the Baroness says, "Heavens no, I haven't been this entertained in years." And she smiles, and it's a close-up, and there's a yellow reflection in her glasses. Did I mention she's smiling? Right? So Hama is making us a little bit complicit in this terrible behavior. And it's pretty small on this page, and it's not, you don't see her on the previous page, but she is still in a wheelchair. But she is back in her Cobra costume, right? In the previous issue, wasn't she in just a bathrobe or a surgical gown or just civilian clothes? All right, and so part of why I don't want to overuse this term, I think it's both helpful and a little, it can be lazy, but like transition issue, this issue, G.I. Joe, part of what makes me think this is that the first page does not start with like a chase or a fight or a flight, someone running from something. And the last page doesn't have that, nor immediately promise it. I don't feel like, the final page of this issue isn't someone saying, "We attack at dawn," right? Or, like when the Joes round the corner, the landmines will explode and they won't know what they won't know what'll have hit them. What happens on this final page is the recon team has a phone call with the Joes back at HQ, and they hang up because they finished their call.
Roger that. Yeah, it's quite abrupt. It doesn't have that sort of cliffhanger elements that you would typically expect to see as on a last panel. So
you mean both as sort of a G.I. Joe comic or maybe any comic?
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, any comic, but particularly G.I. Joe, where we, I think, have come to expect it of a G.I. Joe comic, that you're kind of left on the edge of your seats, wanting to know exactly what happens next, and you don't have that immediate tantalization of like, oh, I just want to turn the page and find out the next thing. It's like, click, okay, maybe they're going to go for a coffee and talk about that weird phone call.
As a thought exercise, everyone, imagine if in the second to last panel, Duke and Stalker say, "Be on alert," and Stalker says, "You're undercover. That's extra stressful." Imagine if this final panel were Scarlet in her disguise, looking over her shoulder, saying, "Roger that. Oh no." Or, "Roger that. Wait, the signals ... So I hesitate to make a suggestion. Well, Larry Hama should do this, or Larry Hama should have done this, right? Not my job. I will do that with the art and color. But that can be sort of cheap. That can be artificial. That can create more problems, because then in the next issue, when it comes time to write 318, Hama thinks, all right, well, what was it that caught Scarlett's attention, or what's the problem in this suburban house? And if it's like not, if it doesn't follow through on the promise, if it's something like, Sean in the wheelchair bumped into a lamp and like the lamp fell over and shattered. Think that's dumb or disappointing, or sort of that might, if it's like Monty comes back and he's got a pistol, right? And he's like, "I know who you are." It's like, well, that's artificial. That's too fast. But just as a thought exercise, part of why I'm thinking about this is that I have been reading The Walking Dead Deluxe, which is this color reprinting of The Walking Dead, and an issue comes out every 2 weeks. So it's reprinting all of The Walking Dead, but much faster. And did I mention it's in color? And lots of people are reading lots of comics. There's not necessarily a lot to compare the G.I. Joe monthly and Walking Dead, except that they're both from Skybound. And in every issue of The Walking Dead Deluxe, in the back pages, Kirkman shows his original handwritten plot for that issue, and then has a page of commentary on what changed between his actual plot and then the issue as drawn and scripted. And because it's these two Skybound books that are both like long running, and because I've been thinking about sort of Robert Kirkman as a writer who sometimes writes really amazing cliffhangers and sometimes just has a comic sort of end, and it's more for the trade paperback where he's going to put these 6 issues in a row and there are not chapter or cover breaks from the end of one issue to the next. And it really is just the next moment when the first panel of the next issue, the next chapter, shows up in front of you. Sometimes we get amazing cliffhangers at the end of G.I. Joe, and sometimes we don't. And I would like them more often than not, but I also think that there's enough intrigue in this issue that I don't, or think about a writer like Brian K. Vaughan, who wrote Why the Last Man and Ex Machina, and is co-writing Saga. And Brian K. Vaughan is a real expert at, tiny, tiny, tiny cliffhangers every page, a big cliffhanger every issue, and then a like heartbreaking, gasp-inducing cliffhanger every 6 issues. And I think a few readers out there may feel like it's sort of overdone. That since you know there's going to be some cliffhanger as you're getting to the second to last page, you're starting to say like, all right, here we go. What's it going to be? Who's in trouble? Who's about to die? Right? Or what did they forget? Who's lost? Turn the page. I
just scrolled down to the end of my notes and I saw, there was a thing that I didn't mention. They talk about minding your P's and Q's, Tim. Is that a colloquialism that you would regularly hear?
A little bit.
A little bit.
Yeah.
So if you're wondering where it came from, it's oldie English. It means, probably as everyone knows, mind your language, be on your best behavior, watch what you're doing. So there's quite a lot of different theories as to where it originates. The sort of the broad theme seems to be that it's about the position of the vertical line before or after a circle representing P or a Q, or like D and a B. And but it's been around from 1800s, and there's a few different theories, but that seems to be the prevailing thing of where it came from. Greg, for completeness, Greg does point out one of the other theories is about pints and quarts, so making sure you're getting the right glass at the bar, a P or a Q, pint and quart.
You know what? I can't let this episode end without an error detected. Page 19, everyone. Second to last page of this issue. Error detected in the in the third panel. There is an asterisk with no accompanying footnotes. Wetsuit says, we've dug in and created a hide with counter surveillance measures, and we have set up an op, asterisk, at the tree line to monitor casino activities. But nowhere on the bottom of that panel or page is there a yellow box telling me what op means. But there was one on the previous panel, and there is one on the next page. So sad face. But I think I can understand from the context. So
an
operation.
I guess. Oh, right. Okay. You'd expect to be operation, but Diana,
observation.
Filling in the asterisk.
Creative consultant Diana Davis swoops in at the very end of the episode to satisfy my curiosity and offer an explanation. Observation post. OP. Okay, so it wouldn't be. So I said it wrong, and we have set up an OP, not we have set up an op. Cool. Well, I just might.
I guess operation also works, but yeah, in the context of wanting to have it explained.
I just minded my O and my P.
Should we talk about the great letter in the back of this issue?
Yeah, I'm really impressed with this guy, Mark, who says, why doesn't Destro show his nanotech on his wrists anymore? He used them in issue 225, page 6. Destro held the entire weight of the castle, and in the answer, editor Alex Antoni says, how do you think Destro was able to do such amazing things in 312 and 313? Which I think might be having it both ways. I think in case Hama and editor Alex forgot that Destro's hands had been, what was it? Were they sort of chopped off and like replaced with nanites? He's got cyborg hands.
Molly Steel cyborg hands, yeah.
Yeah, so in case everyone forgot, then you can say, oh, well, this battle he had with Cobra Commander in 312 and 313, and Serpentorcon, that's part of how he won. And if Hama never forgot and was writing those fights in 312 and 313, knowing that Destro had these enhancements, but didn't call it out, then, readers from 10 years earlier could say, well, yeah. That's the letter you were talking about, Mark, right?
Yeah, I was thinking of a particularly great letter by a guy called Mark, but it wasn't specifically that one. It was actually a different letter by a different Mark. I think we've seen him in the pages of the letter column before.
Mark, would you like to read this letter out loud?
I think I would.
Okay.
The letter goes, Dear Alex and crew, It was great to experience conclusion to this mutant invasion era of the book in ARAH 313. We went from a big-scale, all-out war to a more personal one on one clash between Destro and Cobra Commander, and Mooneyham really delivered on the art. I really hope you guys are able to keep him working on G.I. Joe. Hats off for the inspired choice to use the Cobra Commander Retaliation toy design. Joe has such a rich history in number of both characters and different versions of those characters, so it is always fun to see a lesser-known version getting some time to shine. I am on the edge of my seat to see where the story will take us next. I hope we will be able to see a bit more from characters' plots that have been on the back burner, such as the mystery of Sherlock and Alcabra, or what's happening with characters we've not seen for a few issues, like Laura and Sean Collins. With Serpentor Khan killed, Mindbender and Cobra Commander captured, we have a power vacuum at the top of Cobra. I hope this space means that we get to see a return of some of the Cobras like Cesspool, Tomax and Zaymot. Major Blood, surely overdue a promotion after all of these years. Perhaps it's time for General Blood's moment in the sun. Oh, this letter didn't have very much editorial control before the person pressed the send button. So, or maybe some lesser seen Cobras like Overkill or Iron Claw, only seen once before in Final Test, the toy comic pack that Larry wrote. Until next time, Yo Joe, from Mark Talking Joe Seddon, Talking Joe podcast, who promises to check and recheck his letters before he sends them next time.
I can't wait to meet General Bud. Okay, and then editor Alex Antone says, Yo, Mark, as with the previous letter writer, I hope your patience persevered. Issue 314 featured Sherlock and Alcabra. I'd also love to see the return of some old Cobra favorites and hopefully few new ones. Stay tuned.
There we go. Yeah, always nice to get a letter in.
Yes. Is this your fifth in Real American Hero?
Losing count. I think it might be around about 5.
That's great. And then you had 1 or 2 in Energon Universe? G.I. Joe?
I think it might only just be 1 in Energon Universe
so maybe,
far, but I'm not writing quite as frequently to the Energon Universe one.
Maybe 6 total. At the very end of the letters page, the editor says, I want to thank all you Joe readers out there for making this title such a massive success. It's because of your unwavering support that we're able to do cool things like silent missions, which continue to push the boundaries for what ARAH can be. And based on the feedback what we received was many folks' first exposure to A Real American Hero. And I want to spend a minute on this because I had said earlier in this episode, I doubt issue 317 is a lot of people's first issue of G.I. Joe. But that's a dumb guess. That might be wrong. And that's me taking for granted that I've been reading this book since 1989 and assuming that, only people who, know G.I. Joe and like G.I. Joe are getting into G.I. Joe. But funny story, 2 months ago, my cousin texted me and said that her daughter, which is my first cousin once removed, do I have any graphic novels that I could donate? Because her daughter was doing a school play and they needed props. And the school play was set at a comic convention. And I thought, I don't know how much I can give you. How big is this? How big is the set? And she said, well, it's a bunch of students doing 6-minute plays. So, and it's all being sort of assembled in front of the audience, sort of, 6-minute play, take everything down, put up the next stuff, 6-minute play. And I thought, okay, I don't exactly know what this is, but that's a sort of pretty small scale. And so I filled a short box with some damaged graphic novels that we have not had to ship back to the distributors, but that are still perfectly readable, and some Energon Universe G.I. Joe issues, the 4 miniseries, Duke and Code Commander, etc. Because we've got some extras. And And I thought, wouldn't it be funny if some, is it 8th grade? I think she's in 8th grade. If some 8th grader somehow discovered G.I. Joe, and somehow I knew that, even though my cousin and her kids live 7 miles up the road, 2 cities over, 2 towns over, right? I do not live in Boston. I don't live in a suburb of Boston. I live in a city that borders Boston, right? And last Saturday, I went to the store, and there were these 2 boys who looked about 8th grade, and they were looking at G.I. Joe, and my manager pointed and said, and my employees know to do this. If I happen to come in and someone's looking at G.I. Joe stuff or is asked about G.I. Joe or Transformers stuff, they point. It's like, go talk to them. And so I went over and I said, hey guys, do you have any G.I. Joe questions? And they said, yeah, we read some and we want to read more. And I was trying to suss out, was Real American Hero, we got the compendium, or, Energon. And we talked, and it turned out that they had worked on one of those other plays. And while they were sort of during their downtime, they were just reading comics, which is what I sort of had hoped would happen, not even the G.I. Joe stuff, just any of the stuff that I put in that box. Because it was, 24 like damaged graphic novels that we can't sell, but that are perfectly readable, like, a bent cover. And they said, and we're here to buy a birthday present for our friend, which means a classmate. And we read some of these G.I. Joe ones, but some were missing, which I think means that, they've been distributed around like a bunch of people. And so I think they read like Duke 2 and 5 and Cobra Commander 3, even though I'm pretty sure I put in complete sets. And they said, so we wanted to get them sort of that. And so this light goes off in my head. And I thought, okay, well, we can sell them. We've got like 5 packs of the miniseries that are half price. And we've got the paperbacks that are, I think, $16.99. And, so remember, you got to read them in a certain order. These come before the monthly G.I. Joe. And it's like, if you want to know what Void Rivals is and Transformers is, Duke's in Transformers 2 and Jetfire's in Void Rivals 1, and what are the connections? And so I have this whole sort of explanation. I'm not trying to overwhelm them. And I don't know if they're in a hurry, and they were not in a hurry, and they ended up buying Duke Volume 1 and the other 3 miniseries as 5 packs. And so jokingly, I said, make sure you read them before you give them to your friend. And they said, no, we will. But I couldn't believe that they had made their way to my store, because I assume that they go to school 2 towns over, 2 cities over. And I said this to my manager, and he said, well, maybe they're in a drama program that's a bunch of schools all in the area. Because it does seem a little unusual that they would come here. And I thought, I can't wait to tell Mark on Talking Joe. I did it. I mean, we do a little bit of this all the time, but I specifically got 2 or 3 young people into G.I. Joe. And good news, folks, I was describing, the Energon universe, and I said, and one of them said, how old is G.I. Joe? Because these comics seem really new. The monthly G.I. Joe Energon universe is only up to issue 7. And I said, well, it started in 1982, and I happen to have like a spare copy of the $1 reprint of issue 1 that IDW did, the 100 penny press edition. And we had that as a back issue, and I pulled that out. The compendium was over there, and I said, oh, this is issue 1. And, the series is, had this one publisher, and then it went to this other publisher. And then I held up issue, 316, 317. I said it continued, and the same guy's been writing it the whole time. But these 2 different universes. And so they walked out with the 4 miniseries that launched G.I. Joe for the Energon universe. And also I cut them a deal on the $1 reprint of G.I. Joe issue 1 from 82 that IDW did. And it doesn't include Hot Potato, but that's okay. And I, sort of saying like, this looks more old fashioned. There's more dialogue. The art looks sort of, older. And I did it. I got 2 or 3 older boys, young men, into G.I. Joe. This wasn't like a 20-year-old who's like, yeah, I know the movies. These kids did not know what G.I. Joe was, and their first exposure was the Energon universe. So
amazing.
So a little pat on the back for me, and a big pat on the back to Skybound for once again making really good comics and making them accessible. But just to go back to this note at the end of the letters page in issue 317, thanks, Greg. Greg says, "Mission accomplished." Tim in the comments. You're welcome.
I'm just thinking, sort of, in the aftermath of you going to a convention like Joe Fest or Codename Iowa or one of these, Assembly Required in Iowa, and the person in the hotel room staying after you, sort of just opening the drawer and finding a copy of G.I. Joe comics and being converted.
There are, sometimes it was some famous comics artist hid sketches at a convention like San Diego around the hotel, and aren't the guys who were doing call sign Longbow, they're hiding some like challenge coins at Joe Fest or the DFW G.I. Joe show, and if you bring it to their booth, they'll give you an action figure. It would be fun to hide G.I. Joe comics at a G.I. Joe comics convention, G.I. Joe convention. But I just want to point out that, and then earlier in the letters page, editor Alex says, no plans for a second Real American Hero book, like Special Missions. Although, as you saw with Silent Missions, we think the market can support some additional ARAH content if we have something cool enough. And so taking these two comments together, it seems like Silent Missions was a success, right? This is not like promising more Silent Missions, right? We're decidedly not getting a second monthly, G.I. Joe book, because there already are two. There's the Energon Universe and there's Real American Hero. But I think there's a tone to letters page responses when a book is in trouble. Like, tell your friends, be sure to write letters. And there's a tone when a book is doing well. Like, we're doing well. Thanks, everyone, for supporting us. And I think G.I. Joe is doing well. But, everyone who's listening, you can do your part. Go get that nice newsprint reprints of Silent Interlude at your local comic book store and lend it to someone who kind of remembers G.I. Joe, or, lend them your Duke miniseries, or, give them 316 and 317 and say, I want you for Cobra Army. Or, maybe you're like giving them a toy for their birthday, or, like a DVD. That's not a good example. No one buys DVDs anymore except for me. DVD of one of the live action movies, the animated movie. I don't know. But I like getting a little peek behind the curtain that things are going okay at Skybound for G.I. Joe, because during the entire IDW run, I had a feeling that things were going only okay in terms of sales.
Yeah, or possibly at times slightly less than okay, but
it did last 150 issues. So
yeah. I think anecdotally we're sort of hearing that it sort of had peaks and troughs, but it sort of was beginning to kind of grow a little bit towards the back end of. Let's have a scan ahead to what's coming up in the world of G.I. Joe. So G.I. Joe number 8 from Skybound in the Energon universe is out June 18th. Not too far away.
And we think that's still accurate, even though issue 7 was a week late.
Well, the last time we checked, it hadn't been delayed. So that was this time last week. We checked; it was still showing June 18th. So, yeah, do feel free to check in the background.
All right, yes, the Image Comics website still has June 18th for Energon Universe G.I. Joe number 8.
Void Rivals continues. June 25th is the next issue there. I think that's issue 20. And we've obviously got the G.I. Joe Pythona story continuing in there, so to a bigger or lesser degree. We've also got Transformers continuing. We're up to issue 21 now, so The next issue for that is out this coming Wednesday, which at the time of recording is the 11th of June. And if you've not been paying attention to Transformers, G.I. Joe is showing up at the moment. So if you want to see how G.I. Joe is being represented in the pages of Transformers and which characters are there, that is the place to look. And it's, another good one, another little focus, because I have seen a preview, so I do know that G.I. Joe fans can expect some good stuff in that next issue. And then for those of you that are collecting the trades, G.I. Joe A Real American Hero Volume 3, collecting the third arc, let's call it, the second stint from Chris Mooneyham, along with the issue that Andrew Cronky did, is out on June the 18th as well. And there's two versions of that cover, one Destro versus Cobra Commander, and the second one being a Cobra Commander solo image, which I believe is a reuse of a trading card image that Chris Mooneyham created for the compendium set.
And then the Codename G.I. Joe Codename G.I. Joe Book 1 hardcover, which collects the Duke miniseries and the Cobra Commander miniseries from Skybound in the Energon universe, plus the Free Comic Book Day 2024 story. I believe that is also going back to a previous date. I think that's June 11th. My store got it early. We can't sell it yet, but we got it early, which sometimes happens if a book distributor is shipping you books. So you just put it in the back, or you keep it in the shipping box and you tape the box shut, so you don't sell it by accident.
Mm. And then, of course, this time next week, this time next month-ish, July the 2nd, the mission continues with G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, issue 318. So that's got a cover with Storm Shadow and Dawn in the sewers. And if you're particularly excited to find out what happens in that issue, Skybound have released a 4-page preview, giving a bit of a hint of what is to come. And it's looking like it's going to be a little bit more action-packed again. So not just a racetrack pattern circling the existing plot points. It is going to progress it with some sewer-based mission action. So, Tim, I think that was pretty much it. There's been quite a lot of comments in the sort of quite a lot of activity in the comments. So sorry if we've not been able to pick up absolutely every single one of those comments. But
when Mark,
thank you,
when
for
Mark
getting
pauses,
involved.
When Mark pauses, when Mark's talking, and then he just doesn't say anything for a second, he is reading your comments and thinking, "They like me. They really like me."
Well, there was one comment here. There was asking about Netho Diaz. Did Netho ever draw the Cobra Casino? And I don't know if he specifically drew the Cobra Casino, but he did draw a few pages at the very back end of G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero from IDW. Was it issue 300 itself, or like 299? Something like that. He drew a handful of pages with, I think, ninjas versus the like Revanche robots, and versus the Genghis Khan character,
and
broken out of his giant test tube.
He is very busy drawing X-Men these days for Marvel, the adjectiveless X-Men, since it ships. Is it 18 issues a month? A year? It's every 3 weeks or something like that.
Very good to see Netho's career taking off and being on such a big book.
Speaking of taking off, we will both be flying to. Both Mark and I will be flying to Augusta, Georgia soon to attend Joe Fest, and we hope to talk with you then. A week after, I will be taking off to Dallas Fort Worth for the DFW G.I. Joe toy show. So I will be at 2 G.I. Joe conventions 2 weekends in a row. And also, speaking of taking off, we've been doing this in a while. It's probably time for us to finish the show and stand up and do the other things that we do.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. So, Tim, where can you be found when you're not talking to me about all things G.I. Joe?
YouTube at Atomic Abe for fascinating video essays. My brick and mortar comic book store, Hub Comics, which has back issues of G.I. Joe, and my blog, arealamericanbook.com.
Very good. You can find out more about us at the website, which has links to all of the places. talkingjoe.co.uk is that website. You can find links to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, also buttons to get in contact with us, leave us a message, etc. We're also on Patreon, patreon.com/talkingjoe. So a big thanks to our backers, Richard, Sam, Bill, Christopher, Justin, Rob, Shane, Simon, Chris, Joe, Craig, Frank, Mike, D, Shane, V2, this version of Shane.
Yellow pants, purple top.
Has got yellow pants. And a monocle with its own robotic arm. Plus Infinite Entertainment and Patrick, who are all getting early access to episodes as well as some exclusive content. But as we fade away until we come back the next time around, please just leave us, Tim, with a particularly profound and important closing message.
Nobody beats Talking Joe, an international podcast.
Laters.